The RPG is easily the best launcher in Battlefield 6. It has great projectile speed and does incredible damage, and if you practice with it, it can even be a better anti-air launcher than the SLM because it will destroy attack helicopters in only one hit. Not to mention the fact that you don't have to worry about locking on and getting your rockets flared away, so there is really no counter if you're able to be accurate with it. It does have some weird mechanics though that a lot of people don't know about because the amount of damage that you deal with it is affected by both where you hit an enemy vehicle and the angle that you hit it at. I think that some people already know about how the damage changes based on where the rocket hits a target, but in this video I've managed to figure out how the damage scales based on your angle of attack, so be sure to stick around because I haven't seen anyone else figure this one out yet. Let's start with the RPG's damage as a good baseline for the rest of this video. If you didn't know, the RPG deals a drastically different amount of damage based on where you hit your target, so if you ever feel like you aren't doing any damage to a vehicle, you probably just are hitting them in the wrong spot. Shooting an enemy tank from the front is the least effective, and as you can see it'll do about 204 damage. Hits to the sides, though, do about 350 damage, which is already about a 50% increase in damage compared to a hit to the front. Hits to the rear, though, do the most damage, about 590. The vehicles in this portal mode that I have only have 500 HP, so you won't see any numbers about 500, but you can see if we shoot the back, this tank blows up in one hit with over 500 damage. Keep in mind that tanks in normal modes of Battlefield 6 have 1000 HP, so you can destroy a tank by yourself with only 2 rockets when you hit the rear. This difference in damage really points out that you absolutely should try your best to avoid fighting tanks from the front because you'd need 5 rockets to take one down. If you have the anti-armor training path on Engineer, you do spawn with 5 rockets, but the chances of you shooting 5 rockets before the tank kills you is almost none. So already from this positional damage alone, you can see that it's generally very good to position yourself into a more advantageous position to attack a tank because it will greatly increase your chance of actually destroying that vehicle. Or the other option, of course, is to play with a lot of friends who also are playing Engineer because 4 people trying to take down a tank from the front has a much higher success rate than 1 person trying to take down a tank from the front. Let's talk about how these damage numbers change with your angle of attack. So the damages that I just showed are applicable when you hit a tank dead on. So in this case, the angle of attack is 90 degrees. If I'm square up with the tank, shooting the side, I'll do about 350 damage. You can see though that if I'm not perpendicular to the side of the tank and I shoot my rocket, I only do 186 damage, so obviously a lot less. So this got me wondering, what angle of attack do you actually need to be able to get some of these damage bonuses for hitting particular sides? And the question that I want to answer is, how much does your damage actually decrease based on your angle of attack? So to test this, what we're going to do is we're going to shoot rockets at this tank from several different angles, and we'll record how much damage we do. We're also going to keep track of the distance between us and the tank because we're going to need that to determine the angle of attack. So you can see that right above the tank, it shows the distance between us and the center point of this tank. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move along this line right here, and I'll shoot rockets at the tank, and we'll record how much damage we do. And while I do this, I'm going to aim right at the rear middle of the tank, so just below this little groove right here. So to start off, you can see we're at 14 meters, so we'll shoot 1 rocket. We did 186 damage. Now we move back to 15 meters, we'll shoot again. We did 190 damage. 16 meters for 220 damage. 20 meters for 359 damage. 24 meters for 471 damage. And at 26 meters, we will presumably destroy the tank at this point. And we do, with 500 damage. So I took all of my data and now I need to process it. Be warned though, I'm going to go into some math here, so you can skip forward to this timestamp if you hate math and just want to see the results. If you're a big nerd though, join for some beautiful Microsoft Paint illustration because somehow we need to calculate the angle of attack between my rocket and the tank. So here we are with this beautiful illustration, and I'm going to guide you through the math of how we actually figure out what the angle between us and the tank is for those shots that I just took. So the one thing that we obviously know is we know the distance between myself and the center point of the tank. So we'll draw a little line here in blue, and we're going to call this distance D, which is the distance that we just recorded as we did all those measurements. The rocket that we're shooting, though, is not hitting the tank here at this blue center point, it's hitting at this red dot, so we're going to get a different trajectory here, shown in red. And for this one, we'll call the length of this red line R to be the range between us and our target. Now, the angle of attack that we want to calculate here is between this red line here and this black vertical line that's the back of the tank, so we're going to draw that angle out in green, and we're going to call that angle theta. But how can we get this angle theta from this information we have alone? Well, in reality, we actually need to get a few more measurements and do a lot of triangle math. So first off, we can get the distance between the red and the blue line, which I'll still draw in blue. We'll draw this here. So if we stand at the back of the tank in Battlefield 6, we can see how far it is to the center point, and then we can get that distance. It's about 6 meters, but for the sake of keeping everything in variables, I'm just going to call it T. If you remember, I walked along that line on the floor, and there's a reason that I walked along that line, and it's because we can measure the distance between the center point of the tank and that line on the floor, which I'll draw in this black line right here. And we'll call this distance X. And to make our lives a little bit easier, I'm going to fill in the red triangle here so we can also draw this line up and over to the point where we're attacking. And this distance here is also x. Now at this point, you're probably looking at this and wondering what the heck this idiot that you're watching is thinking, but really at the end of the day, we just have a few triangles here that we can solve with some triangle math to figure out the things that we need. And the thing that we can use to do this is actually the law of cosines with this triangle, this red and blue combination triangle here in the middle. So the formula that actually we need for the law of cosines is that r squared, the distance between us and the target that we're hitting, is equal to d squared, which I'll write in blue, plus t squared, also written in blue, and then I'll switch to just black for this one, minus 2 times d times t times the cosine of this angle right here, which I'll call phi. So this is almost great. We almost have enough information to at least determine more about the triangles that we need here, but we don't have this angle phi, but luckily we can easily calculate this because this is a right angle here. So we can calculate that phi is equal to 90 minus the inverse cosine of x over d. We can then take phi and plug it into this equation here, and the other thing that we know, and the last thing that we'll need, we know that this is a right angle here, and as is this. So this angle theta right here is actually the same thing as this angle right here. We can easily calculate that as theta is equal to the inverse cosine of our two variables x over r, where we can calculate r from this formula that we wrote up here. Of course, I'm not going to calculate all of this by hand. I'm going to refer to my, once again, beautiful friend, LibreOffice Calc. Okay, so hopefully everyone's back for the actual plot here. And I did the same exercise for both the sides and front of the tank as well, where I measured the damage as a function of the angle of attack, and I produced this plot. And there are a number of things that we can take away from this plot. First of all, you can see that the damage scales roughly linearly with the angle of attack with your RPG. And it also seems like 186 appears to be the minimum amount of damage that you can do with an RPG rocket. And you'll get that around like 15 degrees of attack or so. You can see that attacks from the front really don't change that much based on the angle of attack. The difference is like less than 20 damage, so if you're shooting a tank from the front, it's already not optimal, but at least you don't have to worry about the angle of attack because it's basically not going to change your damage at all. Hits to the side, though, are pretty significantly affected by your angle of attack. It changes by roughly a factor of 2, so from 180 damage at the minimum to about 340 damage at the maximum, and you get pretty close to the maximum at around like 60 or 70 degrees angle of attack, which looks roughly like this. When you're attacking from the rear, though, you can see that the angle of attack actually matters a ton. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to test higher angles of attack because, as I mentioned, the vehicles in this portal mode only have 500 HP for some reason, so I can't like easily test this in a actual game, but it's pretty easy to test in Portal. So I unfortunately can't test for anything above about 60 degrees angle of attack from the back. But assuming that your damage maxes out around 590, then that means that even if you hit the rear of a vehicle, your damage can still vary by almost a factor of 3 based on the angle that you actually attack the vehicle from. And you can see that if you want to destroy a tank in 2 hits, your angle of attack has to be at least 60 degrees to be able to do more than 500 damage with a single rocket. So in a game of Battlefield, the angle of attack from the rear actually matters a ton, because if you're attacking from the rear, you've probably snuck around, and it's actually extremely worth it to move around the hit from a larger angle of attack than it is to shoot from maybe some cover on the side. So you can see that if I'm really close to the tank, if I shoot it from right here in the back, I do 192 damage, which really is not that much at all. But if instead I literally just take like 5 steps to the right and shoot it from the rear, now I've done 500, and I mean, in this case, I've blown the tank up and destroyed it completely. So, I mean, essentially the main takeaway from this is that the angle of attack doesn't really matter if you're shooting a tank from the front. It can influence your damage by a factor of 2 when you're hitting a tank at the sides, and it can influence your damage by a factor of 3 when you're hitting the rear of a tank. So if you are going to spend the time to flank to the rear of a tank, take the extra few steps to make sure you get a good angle of attack as well, because it can also have a significant impact on your damage. Let me know what you think of these findings in the comment section below. As I mentioned, I haven't seen anybody else figure this one out yet in Battlefield 6. So as far as I'm aware, it's actually the first time that we've actually figured out how the angle of attack influences your damage with the RPG in Battlefield 6. If you're looking for more in-depth analysis like this in Battlefield 6, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you everyone for watching, and goodbye.